Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I am your host, Corey Barrier, and my guest today is Kit Cummings. Kit, what's up, my man? How are you?
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me, bro.
Absolutely. So Kit is an author, speaker, and the founder of the Power of Peace Project, which is the acronym, or they use the acronym POP for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, dude, tell me all about this project. I'm so interested.
Yeah. It's been a crazy 10 years, from the idea to the creation to the evolution of this thing to bring us to current date. So, I was at about 12 years ago, I was at a crossroads and I was trying to figure out, how can I do what I love to do and what I'm best at? And because I had gotten to do that for a good long run, 25 to 40, speaking, teaching, training, preaching. And
So maybe actually, I know this is what we're going to get to the project, but you've got quite a story before that. So, so maybe let's dial back a little bit earlier in your life and some of the things that you went through and some of the adversities that you've overcome.
Yeah, that's a good
That's
place to
super
start.
damn important, I think.
Yeah, none of this stuff happens without that stuff,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
And it really is the epitome of turning a curse into a blessing, right?
Yes.
So, well, I grew up here in the Atlanta area, and I'm 55, and so my whole stretch has been in and around Atlanta, North Georgia, and so I'm a homegrown product here, and least likely guy to become a preacher, and that's like for real, for real. And nobody saw that come, especially me, because I wasn't that guy. I
Right.
wasn't a religious kid. I didn't go to church. I didn't study the Bible. I wasn't that kid. My like a lot of people, my challenge was a dysfunctional household because of alcoholism. And so, my dad, God bless him, rest his soul, that was his battle, and he never successfully overcame it.
Yeah.
His dad, same battle, no success. And so I was, that apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and that was my story. And so at a young age, drugs and alcohol became a part of my hustle. How to get through, and meaning how do I go through life? How do I do this thing? And I was learned to medicate, because my household had a lot of drama going on in it. And so, I was a very sensitive kid, very social kid. And so you put all that together, and I found alcohol at the age of like 12, 13 years old. And man, it was my friend right off the rip. And then, drugs came along, but I was an athlete and I was a pretty decent student, and socially, I always did pretty good, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so I hung with the right crowd, went to the right school, teachers, coaches, principals loved me, but I had this whole other life. I basically had three lives. I had my jock life because I was a pretty good athlete, played a little bit in college. And, I was one way with those guys, the popular kid hanging with the, athletes, cheerleaders. I got the right girlfriend. And then I had my spiritual life, which was a total sham because I had a very religious girl, a very spiritual girlfriend all the way through high school, pretty much. And so that brought in this young life FCA church thing, which just because I was using my girlfriend. And so I had that kind of life. And then I had my real life, which was my inner circle. And there were 6 of us, and we just tore some stuff up. And there was drinking and drugging and fighting and breaking the law and, getting in trouble and crashing cars and getting arrested and just all that as a kid that was looked at as he's a good kid. I
I
was
mean,
like,
how the hell do you even keep all that together? Like, that's like dating 3 crazy women at one time. I mean, it's a lot. That's a lot. It's a lot of hats to wear.
People deal with their drama different ways. Some act out and become that person. Others run and hide and become that person. Some become a chameleon, which is what I did. And so I would be what you wanted me to be. Now, it has served me now because growing up, I learned how to connect and make friends with all kinds of people.
Sure.
I mean, really, I had all types of friends. So it was not a good thing then because I literally would do what I needed to do. I was the
Right.
guy that wasn't afraid to do anything. I'd take chances, thrill seeking, living on the edge. Well, now that's a part of my job and it's a good thing. But back then it took me into a lot of areas. So fast forward on through college, I went from Walton High School partying like a rock star to University of Georgia partying like a Hall of Famer.
I
And,
bet.
and then graduated into the rock and roll business, at a young age right out of school. And so I graduated into legendary, party status.
So
And
Stevie.
Stevie,
Well, his Steve. Wow, high tech Steve. What the hell? I can't think of his last. Surely to God, Smith, Steve Smith.
how would I know him?
Through Nick. Y'all are all about the same.
Maybe.
Anyway, it's
So
okay.
anyway, so I get to the end of that run and I'm 25 and I am burnt out. So burnout at the age of 25 sucks. I was tired of drinking. Man, I was just, it was time. And so I made a stab at trying to get sober. And then God intervened and I met a guy that changed my life. And he happened to be a minister, but he was young and he was cool and he was a great athlete. And I was like, man, what's up with you? And he started studying that book with me. And I did that like I did everything in my life, which is all out. I don't do anything a little bit. So I'm either trying to save the world or tear some stuff up.
Sure.
And so I went after it. And so after I'd been around him, them, this church, which was new for me, I'd never been a part of a church, I was just lit up. I decided, shoot, I want to do this all the way. How do I become a preacher? And so I got on that track. And when I went to ministry, I really shocked everybody. It me, family, friends. People thought this can't be real. He's joined a cult. I mean, what is it? And so, but that little, run lasted from 25 to 40. And so, yeah, I'm married, had a couple beautiful kids. I'm leading congregations. They keep giving me bigger congregations. And by the time I'm 33, I'm in charge of about 4,000 people. And it was heavy. And so by the time I got to 40, I was out of gas again. And so burnout at 25, which led to my transformation, burnout again at 40. And now all of a sudden I'm getting thirsty again.
All right. So wait a minute. All right. So of all people, I understand the burnout at 25, 100%. But I need you to walk me through this burnout after you started preaching. I mean, I can take a guess, but I'd rather you just tell me. And by the way, I'll tell you an interesting fact. My little brother, who tomorrow I'm 41, so he's turning 39, I guess. And he is right out of Methodist school. He's got his own church already. Wow. It just started, and he wasn't like me. He wasn't one of us.
Yeah.
Right. But still unlikely for my little brother of all people. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around. So anyway, yeah. I just thought I'd interject there. But go ahead. Yeah. Sorry. So that burnout.
The answer to your question is somewhere along the way, and why this is a challenging profession that people get into is you get a lot of exposure. You get a lot of, accolations and validations and, people telling you you're awesome. And then all of a sudden you're in the seat where you're the marriage expert, even if you're not. You're the child rearing expert. You're the personal character expert. I mean, it's like, and when you're young and you're talented and you're ambitious, if you're not careful, at least with me, that calling, which was an honest calling, and the calling's still on my life, it's just a different, way of doing what God called me to do way back then.
Sure.
It becomes a career. And so then it was like, man, I want that next promotion. And when there's this big conference in another city, I want to be chose to give the keynote. And it's you start protecting what you have, and growing the church now becomes a means to an end, where it used to be just a pure. And then, it's subtle. You don't realize it's happening, but it's happening. So, and the marriage, was unattended. And so, as I grew and I'm an ambitious guy, and that can be a very dangerous thing in the ministry, right? So
I don't know. So this is so fascinating. Like I'm on the same page. I could see how almost fame. Let's just call it fame. That could kind of go that could kind of go to your head a little bit unbeknownst, right?
Yeah, and you're humble. You're
Yeah.
not. I'm not running around arrogant. If you'd have come, you wouldn't have said, "Dang, get over yourself." But every time they stand and cheer after you preach, or they laugh at all your jokes, and they line up to come and shake your hand, it makes you feel good. And when there's a little boy inside that's still wounded.
Oh.
By the way, my dad passed when I was in college, and unfortunately, it wasn't an honorable, way to go. And that jacked me up for a while. I went dark, and so over 30 years, I've healed my relationship with my father. It was such a significant relationship.
Would you like
But
to expand on that at all?
yeah, I mean, it was here, and then he was gone, and it was a decision that he made.
He made a decision to
Yeah.
go on.
And
Okay, I
so
got
it
it.
was, it was drug and alcohol related, but it was also just a terribly dark time. And so he checked out.
But you do something, kid. I'm actually glad that I had you explain that because when we talk about drugs and alcohol, your next round could kill you, or your next drink could kill you. That we're not talking about the physical beer. We're talking about you. That could be the last straw that makes you take yourself out,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
that's what we mean by it can kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went through my dark period,
Yeah.
later in life, and I didn't understand him, and I was mad at him, and why'd you leave me? And, we weren't cool when he passed. We were in a, very contentious. So it was worst case scenario for me. I didn't get a chance to say I'm sorry. He never got to see me become. He never got, it
Man.
was just, but that was it. Now I look back and it's like, man, my dad gave his life for me, because if he hadn't have died, I don't know that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. I don't know if I'd have been broken to get to the point at 25 where I was ready for God's call. I don't know if I would have, been able to get through the storm that came at 40. So when you're living in that bubble and people put you on a pedestal, it's very subtle, and you can act humble, but inside you're chasing that next validation. Because if the little boy in there is still wounded, and now he's all grown up and talented and has a big following, he's still wounded. And
Yeah.
so you start feeling like I shouldn't speak for anybody. I started feeling like a fraud, because I'm like, man, if anybody ever knew me, they would know I'm not the rock star they think I am. And so you start feeling like just a poser.
So, like the imposter syndrome.
Oh, hell yeah. And then you start creating an exit strategy. It's like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm burnt out. I could always just, go do something else. Why don't we go make some money now? And so, I decided to make that move, and they didn't let me go or chase me off. They actually tried to get me to stay. And I said, I got to go. And so I went into this corporate wilderness experience where I'm trying to figure out how to support my family, and, doing hustle, commission-based jobs, whether it was banking or real estate or insurance. I'm just like hustling, miserable, because I wasn't doing what I knew I was put on the planet to do.
Well,
You know,
and you went from hero to zero.
oh, bro. And it was public. Okay. So
Right.
when I went, yeah, you're asking great questions. So, when I get out, now all of a sudden I find my marriage is on the rocks, and I didn't know it. I was surrounded by a staff and deacons and elders and, congregation that made me feel like, nah, I got a great marriage. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Not so much. So once I got out there and got thirsty again, that marriage fell apart. And so now, and I went crazy for a minute, all the things that I'd been thinking, all those years, when if I could do this, I would do it, but I can't, because, people see you when you're out. They're watching to see what you do, because you do that with pastors, right? Or preachers.
Right. Sure.
And so I kind of got mad at God, because when I left the ministry and started struggling, all those folks that were so loyal to me, ride or die, they were not there anymore, because I was now a good story. And there were rumors flying around about me that I was doing this and doing that, and it was terrible. And the internet was pretty new, and so I was reading some stuff about me in chat groups, and it was all my worst fears coming to fruition, because I was always desperately afraid of failing. And, because when you have this kind of adult child of an alcoholic thing, you're always wondering, when's the other shoe going to drop? When's it all going to fall apart? Because it always does. And it's this subtle thing inside. Well, when everything started tumbling, then it was like, well, I was right. Here it goes. And so I went away and I ran to the dark places, man. I shook my fist at God and I said, you know, I'm going to show you. And I went hard again, hanging out in clubs and driving drunk and crashing cars. But I'm the preacher now that's doing all that. And that was a great story for everybody to tell. And so I was, you know, I just kind of became the thing that I feared. Well, in 2005, I decided, you know, I can't drink anymore. I got remarried and wonderful. I mean, I have the marriage I always dreamed of. I wish I could have been the man that I needed to be in my first one. But you are what you are, man. You do the best where you're at. And so God gave it all back.
I'm on number 3, brother. So, you know, and I have the same feeling about my wife is that, you know, I do believe, look, don't get me wrong. Do we have our ups and downs? Of course. Every marriage does. But for the 95% of the time, she's my best friend.
There you go. Yeah. And that's what, you know, and we evolve and we get better. I'm a better partner now, you know.
Absolutely.
And so, so anyway, I came through that, but I was out there hustling and something made me want to go and serve. I mean, really do service work. And so I started serving at the Atlanta Union Mission and loving on some homeless brothers. And then that led me to working with some incarcerated guys. And because a lot of times those things overlapped. And then I was invited to go into a prison in 2009, and it absolutely changed my life. And all I can say is somehow, some way, when I walked in there, a light came on and God was saying, this is where I want you to be. I want you to help these men. And at the time I was working a couple of hustles and I was making 6 figures and supporting my family. And all of a sudden God drops this on my heart. And I'm like, really?
Ain't no money in this, God. What am I supposed to do with this?
So I end up walking away from that money, you know, the guaranteed money, and going into this crazy world. And because I loved it. It lit me up in a way the ministry never had. Because what I needed, and this is so huge, I needed a congregation with no judgment. I needed a place where I could be me and just be everything that I mean, no posing at all.
Right.
And so I would start preaching things. Well, you know, it was not going in and preaching Jesus. This was going in and preaching change. And man, we could create something together and we could change this broken system. And it was all about hope and dreams. But I found a place where everything was open. I could tell them my worst mistakes and they laughed. You know, I could cry in front of them and man, they were there for me. And these were the ride or die guys that I thought I had.
No doubt.
So 2 million men behind the razor wire became my church. And they helped me figure out who I really was because there was no bullshit anymore. It was just raw. It was real.
Yeah.
And so I kept going. And then I was doing prison tours through states, and we do like 15 prisons in a week, 3 shows a day on a little tour van. And I mean,
So when you say a show, tell me what you mean. I picture you going in, you know, it just like we'd have a circle in a 12-step meeting. I assume by what you were saying, you were going in talking to people like that. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Oh,
it got to be where they promoted it. Yeah, I was riding with Prison Fellowship at the time. They sponsored me, right? So it'd be Prison Fellowship, who's the biggest 800-pound gorilla, you know, in the prison ministry, you know, space. Not a close second. They're all over the world. They put me on a tour. And so it was Prison Fellowship Presents Kit Cummings Power Peace Project. And we'd gather a big crowd of inmates and I'd come and just light them up, you know, and tell the story of this peace movement that was developing in the prisons. And then I took it and did South Africa. And then I took it and did Honduras. And then I took it to Ukraine. And then I took it to Mexico. And Mexico blew my mind. Because I did a prison down in Mexico that's genuine cartel-controlled prison, and we did our program. Because then it had become a 40-day program. I had written a couple books around it. And so now, like, for instance, how it's evolved, and I'll get to the way it morphed into the kid thing in a minute, but I've got a program going on at Hancock State Prison, okay, down in Sparta, Georgia, and we're right in the middle of it now. So it's so fun and fascinating. So what I do with the administration, once they invite me and say, hey, we want to do your thing, I say, okay, I need you to gather me 100 men that have influence in a maximum security prison. Well, for this program, we came up with 50, but they're pretty much the right guys. And but what I mean is we all have all the major gangs represented. And so, the big ones are pretty much the ones your listeners would know. We have Crips and Bloods and Gangster Disciples and the Muslims, who in a lot of ways operate as a separate group. And then we have Aryan Brotherhood. We're working on the Latin gangs. So they never let these guys come together, but they do for our program. So in the gym every Thursday, I'll be headed down there tomorrow. We'll get with this group, of rivals. And then we start working together and teaching them how to work together to create peace in the prison so that I can go to the administration and get them what they want. And so it becomes an incentive-based program, and miracles happen.
That's genius. My God. It's also scary as fuck.
It's fun though. It's like I've developed a way to get close to very heavy guys and disarm them and win their trust pretty quickly. And so right now, the head of the GDs and the head of the Bloods, I've not just kind of gotten to know the ones that are leading it, but I'm becoming friends with them. And now I go to these guys that are hated and feared and never ever do programs. And the biggest problem we have with our program is always demand. I can't work with as many people as want to be in it, because once the word gets out that, man, the power of peace is here, everybody wants to get in. And so it's so simple. You get the right guys in the room and say, look, here's what's in it for you. More peace means better life for you.
Sure.
More peace means the administration is not scared of you and coming and shaking you down and sending you the hole and beating the hell out of you. And so both sides learn to kind of try to work together. And then all of a sudden Crips and Bloods are sitting in the same circle, and we're studying King and Gandhi and Mandela and teaching them about the power of the peacemaker. And I teach them, look, stay in your gang, man. I ain't trying to get you out of your gang. I'm going to put an expiration date on me. And so, stay in your gang, but let me teach you how to be a more powerful leader. And a powerful man is able to change a heart. Violence is lazy. Violence is easy. Man, you make an enemy a friend so that y'all can have better lives. And now you're still in your family, your organization, but whatever your hustle is better. You don't have to take a friend, to guard the shower door because you're worried about somebody coming in.
Right.
You don't have to worry about the chow hall, because usually they do business in the chow hall if they want to get you.
Right.
So all those are things they want. They just don't think it's possible. So I say, what if we could give you the tools to make what you think is possible? And that's how it works.
My mind is blown right now. I have interviewed some amazing people that this is unfucking real. It's unreal. It all makes sense to me. It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But who in the hell, obviously you, would have ever thought in a million years this would have worked?
It was crazy. I just kept stumbling upon the next experiment. And what I found was you've got an army of guys that have never been asked to help. Okay. It's always just lock them down if they screw up. And, if you treat a man like an animal, he will bite you. If you treat him like a man, he will treat you like a man. And there's mutual respect. And so I found that is a human trait, especially among men. We want to be respected. And when somebody respects me, then I'm willing to give respect. But they're living in a culture where they don't think it's even possible. And it's like, no. So I show them pictures of, crowds of convicts in all kind of different colors in different states, peace signs with their certificates and arm in arm with their rivals. And I show them, don't tell me it's not possible. I show them the picture of the cartel guys in Tijuana that are all doing the peace signs, holding their certificates. And I'm like, don't tell me it's not possible. The dude that started this thing with me is a kid that grew up to be a MS-13 gang leader. MS-13 is supposed to be impenetrable. You're not supposed to be. Well, we did. We infiltrated. And that guy became a peacemaker. And so I've seen too much. I've done work on death row. 3 of my friends on Alabama's death row have been executed. Okay, so I've lost my friends. So that changes the way you see the death penalty. And so then they started using their influence on the streets. So now I got all these inmates. This is hilarious. A series of my books has my damn cell phone number on the back of it. So I got thousands of convicts around the country, and they're getting out. Hey, bro, you said to hit you up when we're out, man. We want to be a part of the peace movement. And so it's an army of guys that are coming out wanting to do something.
And like at this point, you started something that can't be stopped. I mean, all in all, nobody would want to stop it. But my point is that you're convincing the worst of the worst, the scary, the people that most people fear.
Yeah.
I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, fear. Their members of their own gang fear them.
Yeah.
And here you come walking in and putting them all together.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, it is. And then they just start believing in new things. And then they started expressing their heart for what are you going to do for the young dudes, our little brothers and our sons and our grandsons. I mean, how are you going to keep them? We don't want them coming here. That gave birth to the program we're doing in the schools. Okay, now the kids look at these. I mean, this is, you think about it, their world is, gangster rap and hip hop and, sex, drugs, and rock and roll and Grand Theft Auto. And, that's their world. Even if it's a kid up in the suburbs in Milton, he's all thug life, and he's not hard at all. So they kind of glorify this world. So when I bring a program in and show them real pictures and videos of real live gangsters becoming peacemakers, they're like, that's cool. And I'm like, all right, well, let's do it here. And so what we do instead of, in schools, who are the gang leaders? The athletes, the popular kids, the strong and talented and cool ones. And so we bring them together for our program and start teaching them how to create their positive influence in the school. And so the inmates are becoming role models for these kids. Well, that now gives the inmates a purpose because they've never had one. I'll go back to them and I'll say, listen, you are changing those brothers out there. Don't let them down. And then I'll go back to the students and I'll say, those brothers are putting their lives on the line to be role models. Do not let them down. And then it feeds one another.
Oh my God.
And it's become a movement.
It's genius.
Isn't that wild? But now check this, for those that are biblically oriented, right? There's a scripture where it says that God uses the lowly and despised and hated things of the world to shame the wise. Okay, so he said, the last shall be first. I'll be with the least of these, the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the stranger, the sick, and the prisoner. And so that scripture is being fulfilled because it's like I get some flack sometimes because I'm sitting there talking about a death row inmate who has changed his life, and that hurts some people. And I have to say, look, the reason I'm doing this is for the victims. Okay.
What do you mean it hurts? So wait, explain that. We go back just a hair. All right. So when you said that a death row inmate gets executed, and who is that? I'm sorry. I'm
saying if I blast, okay, I believe in stories, and this is a great story, and the world needs a story.
Sure.
Hope and change in the darkness. And so when these hated, feared, forgotten men who have hurt loved ones of other people all of a sudden become these peacemaker role models, the victims
got it
out there.
Now I understand. Now I got it. Sorry.
But here's what happened for me to understand it better is in the course of this thing, our oldest son was a soldier and he's out now, but he did 4 combat tours, 2 in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, 1 as a sniper squadron leader. So he's seen war. It's affected his mind. He is doing awesome, beautiful wife, beautiful boys, great guy, but he deals with the effects of war every single day. Well, when he was home on leave on one of his tours, he went downtown with his wife to a party, and there was somebody there that had bad intentions, and nobody knew him, and he ended up slapping a girl, and Justin took him outside and handled it. Well, the guy ran off and came back and got him back out in the yard, had a knife, and he stabbed Justin all up and cut him there's no reason he should have been alive, but he was combat trained. They didn't wait on the ambulance. They got him to Grady. 3 hours, they saved his life. Well, I went to the prison. You know, I told you I can be open there. Yeah, I can say things you can't say in a church. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? That day was really heavy because I had all my guys, you know, and I told them what happened, and I cried in front of them, and that moved them, you know. And so as I'm talking about this guy that almost killed our war hero son, it was hard for them because a lot of them are there for violent crimes, and now all of a sudden I'm talking about a violent crime that affected my own family. And then a hand goes up in the back, and one brother says, "What's his name?" And I was like, "Our son, Justin." They went, "Nah, what's the other dude's name?" And I said, "Michael." And they said, "What's his last name?" And I was like, I know why they want his name.
Oh
Then
yeah.
hands started going up, and they're like, "What's his name, bro?" And then this guy said, "We won't kill him. We'll just touch him." And they wanted to get this guy for me.
Of course.
Now, all of a sudden, as the victim family, which was now a seat I'm sitting in, I was tempted to go ahead and push that button. And I didn't, but I felt how the victims, and I think God wanted me to feel the victims of
Yeah.
violent crime so I could not just love the inmate, the offender,
Right.
prisoner, but love the family that got affected by every crime affects somebody, right?
Man, that's
And
tough.
so that was key. But what I found was, man, I found people that are willing to die for me, but I also
Yeah.
found some people that are willing to kill for me. And I
A
thought,
bunch of them.
anybody in churches that probably would do either of those. I mean,
Right.
we're part of a great church. I love it, man. I mean, I'm all
Sure.
about it. It's cool, but nothing lights me up or shows me God's power more than in the prison.
That is insane.
Yeah, it's been a crazy ride.
Now I'll tell you what I was going to remind. Oh, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to remind you before we started recording. So Kit and I got on the phone one day, and I won't ever really forget. I will never forget our phone call. Were telling me a story that I guess it was an NFL NFL player
Hmm.
um, was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and somebody went in to rob somebody, and he happened to be in the car,
Hmm.
and now he's tell the story if you don't mind.
Yeah, he's a kid that, grew up tough area Savannah, joined a gang because that's what you did to make it through where he lived. And, that thing is for life. And so he grew up in that life, great football player, huge guy, All-American in high school, All-American in college, makes it to the league, and 100th overall pick in the 2000 draft. Excuse me. Yeah, something like that. And but anyway, he's drafted the year before Michael Vick, and he's here the Falcons. And so he played some as a rookie, which is hard to do. So he had talent, but then he stayed connected in that world, kept one foot in the streets and one foot in the NFL, and which is kind of like, in the ministry, one foot over here and one foot kind of dabbling over here. And it got him jammed up. He had a friend that he went and gave a ride to do a thing, and he didn't really know what was going on, but he was still hanging with the wrong kind of guys. An armed robbery went down. His friends split. He ended up getting charged, thought he could beat it, and he ended up doing, state time. And he luckily only did like 4 or 5 years, but, now he's a felon, couldn't get back in the NFL, lost all his money, lost everything.
So, and I think the impactful thing that you had said, not very far off of what you just said, but you said, Corey, imagine, and you don't quote me on this, but I believe this is what you said, Corey. Imagine waking up being an NFL football, a football player for the Falcons, and then that night you're laying down, getting ready to go to prison,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. That's what
And
it's like.
that's a lot of what we're working with kids. So the obvious place to start with the schools was the inner city schools where youth gang and violence, is, incarceration and homicide is going to be, the biggest threats But then the more I started doing it and it worked, I started getting called to the suburbs, because of overdose and suicide and accidental death. So we're losing kids to the streets in the inner cities, but we're losing kids to themselves in the outer cities, the suburbs. And either way, we're losing kids. So the program we developed was a different version of the one that works so well in the prisons. But the kids, it's growing really fast. And so the demand, now I'm doing like 80% schools and about 20% prisons. And then I throw in some churches and corporate gigs and stuff. But it really has evolved into this youth movement. But the inmates will always be the stars, that started it. It's pretty cool.
Dude, that's I mean, like I can't. That's amazing. I mean, that's a better story than building a damn company and employing 500 people. Like you've done something that really, I guess nobody's ever done. I mean, that's pretty. That's a pretty amazing thing to say.
Yeah, it's Dr. King is one of the biggest influences of my life. And just, I didn't even know what was happening at University of Georgia at 25. I read his biography, and it spoke to me. And so I started kind of being interested in him over the years. And then when we started this thing, it was started on his birthday, his holiday in 2011. That was when our movement officially began. 12 guys signed a peace pledge in honor of his birthday, and we started just kind of building it.
So you just had a birthday on that.
Yeah, and listen what happened. It was unbelievable. So, but that little group of 12, now this prison where it started is no joke. It's the most violent prison in the state of Georgia. I mean, it's a lock 'em down prison, and there was 5 bodies in 6 weeks, which you try to find a prison in the U.S. that had 5 different homicides because of gang. That was the prison when it started. So it wasn't a little candy land.
Wow.
And those guys started something that spread throughout that prison, and that prison went from worst to first. It won Institution of the Year that year in the state of Georgia, and rightly or wrongly so, I got a lot of credit for it when those brothers did the heavy lifting. That got me invited. Hey, if you did it there, can you do it here? And it took it to the Midwest, and then it went out to the West, and then it went down across the border. So it was just this crazy ride, but it's always been about Dr. King and my process and principles based on the nonviolence things I learned from King and Gandhi and Mandela. And then this is, it blew my mind, but this past Monday on Dr. King's holiday, I spoke at an event and where we did a little march, and then I spoke at a community event on behalf of Dr. King. And the NAACP the week before here in Atlanta had requested that I speak at their big event, which is a gala, here in Atlanta. It's a big deal. They have dignitaries, a huge theater, a show. It's like a Grammy Award kind of feel to it with performances. And they asked me on the Friday before the Monday, when Dr. King's holiday. And I said, oh, I would love to do it. And it killed me because I'm like, I would love to do it, but I've already committed. I can't back out of another commitment. And they said, no problem. How about if we move you to the end of the slate and we could hit you at the very end? And I said, okay, if I can get there in time. So we work it out that morning. They move me to the front of the program in the morning, and they get me to the place. And I walk in, and it's packed. I mean, and everybody's in suits, and I'm looking like I always do. And I'm like, they said, standing room only, and I said, no, I'm speaking. And they said, oh, okay, let's get you down front. So I go down front, and I find the NAACP president, make sure they know I'm here. And then they sit me like, in one of the first few rows. They don't tell me anything. And everybody who's speaking is coming out from backstage, and they have a, celebrity MC. And I'm like, is anybody ever going to come get me and tell me like when I speak and what I'm supposed to talk about, how long I have? They hadn't told me jack. And so I'm looking at my watch, and I'm enjoying the program, but we're getting really near the end of the program. And I'm like, why did they ask me to come speak? If they're not going to let me speak. And I wasn't dissed. I was just kind of confused. Well, at the very end, the president gets up, and she said something about, now's when we give our Living the Dream Award and, whatever. And I'm just kind of half paying attention. And, I'm paying attention, but I'm not thinking nothing. And she said, we actually had to lie to the person to get them here to make sure that they were going to be here because they had another commitment. And then I'm like, wondering, my little antenna goes out. And so they say my name and ask me to come up front. And they awarded me the Dr. King Living the Dream Award from the NAACP. And I cried, man. I mean, it was,
of course,
this was a very, very big deal on his day in honor of him from that organization.
Wow.
It was quite a day. So that was last week. And so, I mean, that's where this thing has come. And I don't know what's going to happen next, because now the subject.
You got me, tearing up. I mean, I can't even imagine, but of all people, like, you've done something that, I mean, like, literally the people that you model after, Dr. King and Gandhi, like that, you're doing what they did, exactly what they did. I mean, except for you're doing it with much more violent people. Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, it's, I was in, I mean, along the way, there was little points where God would encourage me, through a meeting or a event or an epiphany or whatever. And I had gone to South Africa in 2012 and to go to a Gandhi Peace Summit. And I got a chance to even get on stage and see where the nonviolent struggle started, which was Gandhi was in Durban, South Africa way back. And he was an attorney, and he got kicked off a train because he was the wrong color. And that's where he started his thing, went back to India, came up with his principles. He influenced King, that then took, his own take on that. That influenced Mandela. And that's how we have this, this peace movement around the world that happened. And so I'm down there, and Dr. King's right-hand man on the day he was assassinated is Dr. Bernard Lafayette. And he's a icon, a legend, civil rights legend, and he's still alive. And anyway, he was there, and I went around interviewing people. And so I went to Gandhi's granddaughter and great-grandson and interviewed them. And then I went to the Dalai Lama's special assistant, interviewed him. And anyway, I got to Dr. Bernard Lafayette, and I said, what would you like to tell the brothers behind the wire back in America? Because I told them a little bit about what I do and stuff. And he said, don't stop what you're doing. He said, we haven't seen anybody do it quite like you're doing it, to take it into the places you're going. And he said on the day, Dr. King's last day on earth, he pulled me aside. This is Dr. Bernard Lafayette. And he said, Bernard, the next thing we have to do is institutionalize nonviolence. And he meant take it into the schools. And then he put Bernard on a plane to go to DC and organize the Poor People's Campaign. They were getting ready to have that Poor People's March on Washington, but then Dr. King was assassinated that day. So by the time Dr. Lafayette got on the ground, he heard the AP announcement, that he had been killed. And so he looked at me and said, keep doing what you're doing, because you and others are fulfilling Martin's last wish. And I was like, well, hell, it's on now. I can't. How am I ever going to quit?
You can't. Not that you would have anyway, but now you've had basically it's like a medium talking to you. Like, this guy is talking through, or King talking through this guy.
Yeah, and I got to connect with the Gandhis. That's kind of cool. And then to the Kings. That's pretty cool. And I got a videotaped message to Nelson Mandela before he died, saying, here's what you've done in the United States, in the prisons and the schools. I was told he saw it. So my three heroes, somehow I got connected to them. And so it's just been a magical ride, man. I'm a knucklehead, but God loves knuckleheads. And I love what I do. It's been a hustle. I mean, I'm telling you, there have been times where I was tempted to quit. There have been times where I was opposed. There has been times where I was taking on massive debt. There were times when my marriage was really struggling because I was on the road all the time, and we were struggling financially because of this crazy dream. So I want people to know that, things that kind of look glorious behind the scenes is suffering and pain. You know what I'm saying? To hustle and not give up on your dream. And so, somehow, some way, he's continued to sustain it to now it looks like we finally reached the tipping point where there's enough demand and credibility around this thing where maybe some huge strides are about to be made.
I mean, if the government or whoever the hell funds prisons would just take just a small portion of the money they spend. Hell, if they would just legalize marijuana and let the people out that are in for marijuana, they'd have enough money to fund this project all over the country.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Because, I mean, how much does it cost to house a prisoner each year? Do you know?
It costs more than a college education. Definitely. Yeah, they're going to spend about $50,000 to incarcerate for a year someone on close security.
Holy shit.
Exactly. And we could get someone educated fully for about 30. So it's almost twice as much to incarcerate a dude, but they're making the states huge money. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the products for people.
Well, and that's just it. It's a business. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but it's the damn truth. It's a business.
Huge. And now private corporations are buying prisons, which is very dangerous because now it's about the bottom line. And I think your listeners need to know this. It's a broken system built to fail. We test third graders' literacy, and based on those findings, we, being the United States, this system, the incarcerated complex, the prison industrial system, they know where to build prisons because they know where kids not learning to read, they will choose the streets, and then they'll put together a place for them to stay. Well, now the state signs a contract with that private prison owner, these big corporations, and they commit to always having at least 85% of the beds filled. Okay, so now there's a monetary incentive to fill those beds, and the easiest way to do it is these drug charges.
Yeah.
And then once you get a number, well, now they're starting to buy into pardons and paroles. Now, think about how dangerous this is. They're building more prisons than schools, and now we have the power to incarcerate you and revoke you if we want to keep the beds filled. That's real.
You got to be shitting me.
Mm-mm. And then they learn, a third of the inmates go in for nonviolent offenses, but 2/3 of them coming out violent because of the hell they got to live in there.
Because I guess look, our mutual friend, and I won't say his name on here, but our mutual friend, I think I was either the first or second person the last time he went in to know. And I honestly, Kit, I didn't know for 2 years. I didn't know if he was dead. I didn't know if he relapsed. The last fucking thing I thought was he was in prison.
Yeah.
Well, eventually I started thinking, well, maybe that's the case, but he would have been able to reach out. And finally, it was because of the shame of what really, it wasn't even his fault. You know the story, I'm certain.
Yeah.
So, and I know everybody's probably thinking, well, of course it wasn't his fault. Everybody says that. But really, in this situation, it really wasn't his fault. Like he whatever. We won't go into all that.
I get it.
But I know that he's my best friend. So he's one of the nicest guys. He'd give the shirt off your back, and you know that.
Totally true.
And got stabbed while he was in prison for a nonviolent crime.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And it's wild to me.
Yeah. And then the schools are now the pipelines to the prison. It's a system. And here's what I tell the inmates. If you want them to change it just because it's wrong, that's like people of color in the 50s wanting them to change Jim Crow laws because it was wrong. Well, the powers that be are never going to change a system that's working for them unless they're, shamed into it. Okay. Now, I know a lot of officers and wardens and deputy wardens and commissioners that are good people, and it's not like they're evil scientists. This is a system that's run by money. We know this, right?
Right.
So I tell the brothers, I'm like, look, in the same way that Dr. King marched young people into cities and the country saw on their TVs at night the brutality that was going on against people of color in the South, only then was there pressure for it to change. And so in the same way, if we want to change a broken prison system, it's those brothers behind the wire that are going to have to make the first move. And we've got to do that. And they've been telling me for years, if you get the other side to change, then we'll work with you. And I'm like, just hang on. We're heading that way. Well, now one of the coolest developments here recently is twofold. I've created a program where we train police officers. And I know
in prison?
In the world, in police department.
Okay. I'm like, how the hell does that work?
So now I can go back to the brothers on the inside and say, look, we're working on the other side, but you got to keep giving me ammo. You got to keep showing me results, because they're going to work with us if we start, there's wins in this if we can bring down the violence. But one of the coolest things, and I could have never planned this, Corey, is I'm getting now police department. We got 5 police departments so far we're working with, and they have what's called a forfeiture fund. Okay, so when they bust a drug dealer and they seize cash and jewelry and cars and blah, 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 and that dude goes away, that money goes into a fund, and it's called the forfeiture fund, and they can use it for equipment or vests or cars or training or whatever. But there's a little asterisk that I found out about from one of my police chiefs that said it can be used for community service projects. So we've got police chiefs that are dipping into the bad guy fund and putting it into the program in their local schools. So the bad guys are paying for the programs that's going to keep the kids from getting to them.
That is fantastic.
Isn't that cool?
Wow.
I didn't dream up any of this. All I did is just keep moving forward and see what he's going to do next. So here we are. Kind of crazy, huh?
I don't even know. I had no idea what I was getting into today before I got on this call. I mean, I knew you were a great guy. We had talked before, but I didn't know all of this. I had no idea.
And now the winds are starting to swirl, because now with social media, I don't know if you've seen much of it, but there's more and more stories being released about the horrible conditions in the prisons, and about long-term sentences being overturned by DNA evidence, and just there's awareness being created. And I've always wanted to make a difference on the legislative level, because we don't change some policies. Well, Georgia's got a new governor, and regardless of politics, part of his platform is this problem that we have with gangs on the streets. And so I was tapped and invited to sit on a committee with the Georgia State House of Representatives, and it's the Committee on Youth Gangs and Violence. And so I sit on a 10-member committee with a couple of congressmen and women, commissioner of the Department of Juvenile Justice, Homeland Security, DFACS, the School Board of Georgia, and they wanted a couple of civilians on the thing, so I'm one of those. And so we got to write our recommendations for how we would attack this problem, and it's been presented to the governor. So now one of the things I've been praying about is that we can affect change with legislation and appropriation. And my seat at the table is basically, and this wouldn't have been touched if I hadn't have gotten to sit at this table. And we did a tour of different cities around the country with around the state, with a press conference and then a panel discussion, experts presenting to us, and then us making recommendations to the governor and the House Speaker. And mine was, and every time we had a meeting, I was like the squeaky wheel. And they knew when I raised my hand, I was going to fight for programs in the prisons, because I'm like, gentlemen and ladies, if 40% of the affiliated active gang members of the 75,000 in Georgia that we know of, if 40% of them are locked up and we don't have programs to catch them there, what the heck are we doing? And so they didn't have anybody else arguing that case. And so, he keeps giving us a bigger stage and a bigger voice. And I think that I just have to believe we're going to see some changes.
Wow. I mean, you've already seen a massive amount of change. So how would one, being out of state, how would one help you from, being out of state, being like, I'm in North Carolina. I would love to be a part of this movement. This is unreal. how would somebody like me help you? Because I'd love to be of service.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, eventually as this thing spreads, I kind of built it by going wherever I was invited. So that's what got me all over the place. But, that's basically just telling stories and creating a little momentum in different areas. But now we have focused most intensely on my city and my county, Marietta, Georgia, Cobb County, which is, basically one of the Fulton County, Cobb County, Gwinnett County, especially Marietta and a city of Atlanta is very important. So we're focusing on all the schools in Cobb County, which is 17 public and one city school. And then Hancock State Prison has become our flagship there. And then we're going to systematically grow into other counties, and then it would make the most sense to grow into southern states. I've already done a prison or two in North Carolina, Alabama, most of the southern states, but just tickling it, right? And so to answer your question, there's going to be a time for volunteers. We're always looking for creative fundraising, partners. And then just, help with social media blasts to spread awareness. So I'll have better answers for that I've got the right board now. So right now it's been me against the world, me and a frequent flyer miles and a debit card,
Sure.
and a dream, and
Right.
now I've assembled a board that we have a mayor, a police chief, a superintendent, a state championship football coach, a city council president. It's who's a prominent attorney. We have a dozen real movers and shakers that surround my work that is really going to take us to a new place. So I think in the meantime, anybody that's interested, you could go to Amazon and get one of my books is called Peace Behind the Wire. And it tells the story that we've touched on just a little bit, but I would love for people to read it. And if it speaks to them, to give it to somebody that they think needs to know the story that can get us, invited to where we want to go. So
Can you get it? Obviously you'll know the answer to this, but I mean, how hard is it to get those books into prisons? If you don't, say a guy like me decides to buy some of those books and try to get it into a North Carolina prison, how would I do that?
well, it can be as easy as finding the people that you want to get it to in the prison. It could be the warden, which is usually a little harder, but deputy warden over treatment and care, deputy warden over security. There's people that are tasked with running the programs. I would love it if more of them read the book. I think for families that have incarcerated people, I mean, I've always wanted this to happen. It just hadn't shown up yet, but I would love it if the book got enough, exposure so that people that have loved ones inside, you can go to Amazon and ship it straight to the prison. They won't let you ship the book, yourself to the prison, because it could have, there's all kind of ways to get contraband.
Right.
But it's straight from Amazon to the prison, to the inmate, is how you do that.
Amazon delivers straight to the prison. They are bigger than I thought. I mean, I know they're big. Obviously, that was, but wow, I never would have anticipated that.
Yeah.
That's insane. That is insane.
Because now the families, now the inmates, now we haven't had, a lot of them have expressed this desire, but these 2 million men, and there's another few 100,000 women that are locked up in the land of the free, right? We've made incarceration a business like nobody else. There's not another country that comes close to the number. We have 5% of the world's population here in the United States, and we lock up 25% of the world incarcerated population, okay? And so, I mean, that's staggering. So we have created a beast of an industry around locking people up. No human beings have ever created that but the United States. And so it's, it needs to be changed. But now I've got these brothers. Now think about it. I mean, this is a badass gangster who's got a lot of power. He's got tats on his face.
Right.
And he's in the prison doing a long term, maybe life. And he's involved in that whole gang life. When a brother like that comes to me and says, hey, I know people on the street that have money, they would throw money at this. Now, how can we do that? And I'm like, connect me with people on the streets. So
Hell
this is
yeah.
the heart these guys have. I mean, people would be surprised if they knew who these brothers really are. And all you got to do is treat them with respect, feed them what they need, and ask them to help. And magic happens.
That's insane.
I mean, hits are put off. Riots have been put down. I mean, active threats have been stopped. I mean, it's like miracles have happened. I've forgotten more stories than I remember, and I've got a lot of stories, in these prisons and streets.
So were you nervous going in?
You know what? God even set me up with that, because the kid that I was working with, who became the MS-13, guy, and for those that don't know what that is, it's the most dangerous gang in America by far. So as far as the FBI and Homeland Security and NSA, it's kind of like ISIS, Al Qaeda, Taliban, MS-13. Okay, they have 10,000 soldiers and they just kill people, man. I had an active threat from them on me because I was working with one of their dudes. And that was kind of crazy, because I get a text. You don't want to get a text from a gang saying what they told me. And so I had a cop car sitting in my cul-de-sac. I'm having to tell my wife, I'm so sorry, baby.
What the hell? What did it say? What did the text say?
Oh, it's so disgusting. I can't say it on the air, man.
Well, why? I mean, it's my podcast. You can say whatever the hell you want. I mean,
basically, if you do this, we will do this. They said, you better stop talking to that beep, or we're going to give you beep, mother beep. And so I had to take that down to the gang task force and say, hey, this is from MS-13 inside a facility. And they put a cop car in the cul-de-sac and made me get a gun and register it and all this stuff, teach me how to go through lights and all this stuff. And I'm like, what? Is this really happening? So I experienced some of that.
Teach you to go through like red lights, you mean?
Yeah, they're telling me if someone takes 3 turns with you, well, then just go ahead and get through the red light, call 911. So I'm having to deal with this. This was years ago.
In Atlanta, by the way, which is the absolute worst traffic on the effing planet.
Now, nothing ever came of that, but, we didn't know at the time. But anyway, it was my work with him. And for 2 years, I got with him and studied through the glass, with him on a phone, because he was in a high security lockup. And I taught him the Bible, and he taught me the gang life. And nobody knows about the inside of the gang life if you're a free world dude like I do, because I've had so many of them trust me and teach me. And they teach me because they want me to know the game so I can help them better, right? They don't do that. And so to answer your question, because I had this experience with this kid that I didn't fear, like if they just said, hey, we want you to go start working with this MS-13 gang leader that's looking at a death penalty. Well, I'd probably been a bit nervous, but it wasn't that. It was my buddy that I knew when he was 12 that now is 25 looking at this capital murder case. And so I just wanted to rescue my buddy. Well, once he started teaching me things and I started seeing him change, by the time I went into my first prison, I was fascinated. I couldn't wait to get there. And so that's kind of how God did that. So I didn't go in with judgment or fear, because he had already shown me some things, So everything had to be perfect for this thing to work out.
I mean, absolutely. So just out of curiosity, I mean, you're probably the only guy that I know that can answer this is, when these guys get in the gang, they do whatever they have to do to get in. But for them to exit the gang, how does that work typically? What is an exit strategy if the guy, maybe he finds Jesus or whatever and decides he's done, doesn't want to be in the gang anymore? How does that work?
It depends on the gang. I mean, sometimes it's like a no, it ain't gonna happen. If you try to leave us, it's worst case scenario. For a lot of them, there's ways to get in and there's ways to get out. Getting out, it sucks, because basically, like for instance, I got a buddy in a prison up in Ohio. He was an Aryan Brotherhood guy.
Ooh, yeah.
Now they are very dangerous. Their specialty is contract murder. Okay, so if you want to murder a guy, the Aryans will basically take it out for a price. Okay, so, and you got guys doing life without. You can't put more time on them. Okay, right. So anyway, it's a guy that I really respect. Very strong spiritual guy. Well, he got to the part exactly like you said. for Jesus. He's like, man, I can't do this anymore. So he went to them and said, I got to get out. And they said, well, you know what that means. And he's like, let's do it. And so they set it up, and he gets stomped out. I mean, basically, if you want out, we're going to stomp you out. And
what the hell does that? What does that mean?
They're just going to beat the hell out of you and stomp on top of you until you're usually it's amount of time. Okay, so like in the 13s, you're stomped out for 13 seconds, and it's 5 or 6 guys that are literally just beating the hell out of you for a certain amount of time. They're timing it, and then if you get past that, you've earned your stripes. They might make you put in some work. Believe it or not, sometimes it's you got to kill somebody because that shows them that you're all in. Sadly, girls are joining gangs now. Girls are even starting to get rank in gangs, which we've never seen. Girls many times are sexed in, so it can be a gang rape to join the
right.
So it depends. And so this guy, he got stomped out, and he endured it. Now he's untouchable. Now they respect you. Hey, you can't ever, they're not going to protect you anymore. Don't ever see them, talk to them, ask them for anything, but you're off limits. They're not going to hit you.
Well, so what happens if you're, most gangs, right, have a tattoo of some type or a branding or they have something on their body to affiliate them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens to that?
You get it covered up.
Okay.
It's going to be a prerequisite. There's plenty of, guys on the inside and their hustle is tattoos. You can get
sure.
I mean, a guy I'm working with right now at Hancock, he's the leader of the Muslims. His whole arm is nothing but black now because he was affiliated with another group and he got all that covered up, so you can do it. I've even got one, my tattoo is a story. It's all the places I've been and the significant developments and all the prisons and cultures and stuff. And so mine's a story, but I had one on there that was, I have different faith traditions represented. So if I'm dealing with a Muslim brother, he's going to see himself there. If I'm dealing with a Buddhist brother or a Jewish brother or a Hindu brother, you're going to find yourself in the tattoo, right?
Right.
And so I put the Star of David on there, for my Jewish brothers. Well, I was asked to go down to Jackson, where the Hymax is in Georgia, and their death row is there, and they keep all the really, really high profile, high risk guys there. And the guy who is a very, very national blood leader is there. And he was the first one that was convicted in the state of Georgia for murder and a life sentence at 13. So at 13, he caught a life sentence. And he's 35 now. He's been there for way too long. So the commissioner asked me if I would go sit with him and talk to him because they want to let him go, but they can't because he keeps, every time they let him out of 24, isolation, he gets a hold of a cell phone and starts calling shots, and so they can't let him go, but they want to because there's a lot of political pressure. You've had this kid since he was 13 and he's been there over 20 years and he was only supposed to do 14. So anyway, so I go and get with him, and as we're talking, he doesn't know me while I'm there, but we ended up spending an hour and a half together. He really shows me respect. But anyway, he keeps glancing down at my tattoo and all my tattoos, and he's like, why you got that one right there? And it's the one that I had put on there, the Star of David, which is the 6 points. Well, the Bloods, their deal is 5 points, not 6. Okay, so there's different gangs that have different symbols. Well, that was a problem for him. And he looked down and I said, it's the Star of David. It's for my Jewish brothers. He said, not in my world. And so what I did, I definitely left there, went to my tattoo artist, got it covered up for him, because my commitment was, all right, I need you to see this. I respect you, bro. I'm not going to disrespect you.
Wow.
And so that is a big deal in that world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. That makes, I really didn't think that's where you were headed. Honestly, I thought you were going to say, I got up and got the hell out of there, but it makes complete sense what you did because you had no choice. If you really wanted to help this guy, you kind of had to make that sacrifice in order for him to feel comfortable, which makes sense.
They have to, it's trust, man. It's respect and trust. I've learned more from them about respect, integrity, and loyalty than I ever learned in the free world. because there it means something. You disrespect somebody on the inside, there's different consequences that if I disrespect you out here in the free world. If I disrespect you, you might not, be cool with me anymore, might not talk anymore, might not hang out. I disrespect you on the inside, there's consequences, right? Same with loyalty. If I say, Corey, I got you, bro. You need me on anytime, I'll be there for you. And you call me and say, hey, can you come? And I go, yeah, I'll be there. And I don't show up. Well, I've lost a friend. You do that on the inside and you got problems, right?
Major problems, I imagine.
Integrity. Out here, the word means something. It's like, hey, will you do my podcast? Got you, bro. Give me my word. And then today it's crickets. You can't find me. Well, that's going to be a problem for our working relationship. But if you give your word in there and you break it, you got drunk. And so they taught me the power of these principles that people just kind of wink at in the free world. Doesn't mean a lot.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense.
Yeah, I needed them, man. I really did. It wasn't, they needed me. Right. I needed them as bad as they needed me because I was a preacher who had lost his heart and lost his voice. And so that's why I owe them. How can I ever leave them?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, especially with how much traction like what you've done is just, I can't, it's really hard for me to even wrap my head around what you're doing. Like, it's almost like it's made up. It's like some shit you'd see in a movie that is just a damn movie.
It's not believable almost, is it?
It's really not.
Dude, some of the stories, like, an Aryan Brotherhood leader, been down 37 years. He's the leader of the Aryan Brotherhoods. He comes to our program at a prison in the Midwest because the warden said, I want you to be there. And he's like, I don't want to go. And he said, go one day. And if you don't like it, don't come back. Well, he ended up completing the program. But you understand, the Aryan Brotherhood, that's white Nazis. I mean, they ain't messing around with other colors. Well, he sat at a table with a bunch of young black brothers for the whole 8 weeks, for each weekly segment and doing the daily exercises and stuff. And he was chosen to speak at the graduation ceremony. He got choked up in front of everybody. And this guy's big. He's got a long beard, long hair, Coke bottle glasses. He's got a scar where somebody tried to bite his nose off. He's done hard time for, 30 some odd years. And he gets up and he sheds a couple tears. And he looks over at those brothers. He said, 40 days ago, I would not even sit with them. I certainly wouldn't eat with them. And he said, now I might not live with them, meaning I might not share a cell. He said, but those brothers over there, that's my family. That's like, That's like miracle of God stuff in a prison for them to say,
holy shit,
in front of their guys. That could cost him, man. I mean, that could cost him.
Well, that'd be a riot anywhere else, right?
In every prison, there's crazy stories like that. Like I said, somebody that I've forgotten about, these heroes, man. They're stepping up and doing great things.
That's insane.
And nobody ever gets to know. I'm the only one that gets to see it. But full circle, in April, we'll have our graduation celebration for that group down at Hancock State Prison. And I'm going to invite Free World guys. I mean, I'm going to invite that commissioner from the DJJ. I'm going to invite the congressman that chairs our committee. I'm going to invite some who's who. And they're going to see these guys that have a reputation as the guys that are causing trouble. And they're going to hear them eloquently get up and read a paper that they've written about the power of peace and about their hero, whether it's King or Gandhi. And every time we do it, the Free World guests, they look and they go, how did you do that? And I said, I didn't do anything. What you're seeing, it's been inside of him all the time. It just needed to be brought out. And you guys have never asked him to help, certainly never given him a mic.
Right.
And so it changed the perception of these lawmakers and, the ones that are running things when they start seeing these hated, feared, forgotten men, that they really do have magic inside, just like all of us do. They just need a platform. Well, now if they've stood up and I've told them, look, you've always wanted the powers that be to see you. I'm going to give you a chance to shine. Make the most of it because it ain't going to hurt you.
Right.
One of the guys that completed our program, they get a certificate, and that certificate means something to them. And I always tell them, hey man, take it before a parole board, give it to let the warden see your work, give it to your mom who wants to be proud of you. But I got a call from the Board of Pardons and Paroles in the state of Georgia. There's only 7 people that sit on that committee, and they decide who goes home and who doesn't. I got a call from them, and they said, Mr. Cummings, we're looking at a guy, and he's got life without the possibility of parole. We're trying to see if we can downgrade him to life with the possibility, which basically is them saying, here, we're going to give you hope.
Right.
There's a chance you go home one day. That's there ain't a bigger deal for a guy all day long to say, hey. And so
regardless if they actually ever go home,
give them hope. Yeah.
Just that glimmer of hope, that sliver.
That hope is a dangerous thing in a prison, because once you allow hope back in your heart, it means you can be crushed again. And they're afraid of that, just like human beings are. And so anyway, I said, what's his name? And he said his name. And I was like, there's too many guys out there. I don't know his name. And I said, can I look him up and get back to you? So he said, yep, call me back. So I get on the computer, go to the GDOC website, because it's public information. You can look the guy up and find out what his charge is, his sentence, all that. Anybody who wants to can. And so I get on there, and as soon as I put his name in, his face pops up, and I'm like, that's Chicago, as a guy from Chicago. So I call him back, and I said, sir, yes, I can vouch for him. He was awesome. He did great. So out there, I got to believe there's a dude that now has hope, and he might go home one day. And it's because he completed this program. It's like that. Incredible. That's why there's such demand. Guys want this piece of paper, man.
Of course. I mean, there's nothing else out there like it.
And so, in one of our states, the warden had the idea to put an open call out. Anybody that wants to be in the next round of the Power Peace Project. And I said, you don't know what you're doing. And she said, no, give other guys a chance. So there's 1,200 men in that prison. 700 signed up.
Holy shit.
I can't do 700. And so I went back to the warden. I said, how am I going to do 700? So we did 200, which is the biggest I've ever done. But that is the biggest problem we have, is the demand issue. Because I got guys meet me in the yard going, hey, bro, how come you didn't choose me? And I'm like, I'm not choosing this. I mean, all I do is work with those they give me. That's a great problem to have.
Shit, yeah.
Because we'll come back and do the next round, and we'll catch another 100 guys, And
it's only an 8-week program, right?
Mm-hmm.
So technically, so how many of these, do you run? So if you run 8 weeks, what happens then? Do you take time to go do other shit? What do you do?
Good question. So the plan at Hancock will be, we complete this program in April. We take probably somewhere between a month, 2 months off. And then we come back with a new round of guys, but those guys get to loosely be a part of this program. So the graduates now, we want to keep them going. And so we want them to come in and spur on the next group. And then that group will come by. We'll wait another month to 2 months, and we'll do another one. So theoretically, we could get 300 men through the program. That's 25% of the prison. If you've got 25% of the dudes that are pretty influential, all trying to be peacemakers, I mean, we have a prison out there that saw a decrease in violence 50% over 2 years.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, the model works if I get full support. And with this one, I've got full support. So
it certainly sounds like it. I mean, I don't know how anybody would not be able to support something that's doing so much. I mean, this is just unreal. Your work is you still got a lot of work to do.
You think?
Hell yeah, but it's fantastic because it's just going to grow from here.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's about the tip. So yeah, well, I appreciate your fascination in it, man. It's
this is like I had no idea what a treat I was in for. And when people hear this, like, wow, this is insane, dude.
Well, thanks for giving me a a platform. I appreciate it. I rely on this. This is how we got to get the message out.
Absolutely. And, once we stop recording, I'll tell you what's next on my agenda which is somebody that's local with you.
Okay. Cool.
So just hang tight so I can stop the recording. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on. Man, this has been, I don't even know how long we've been talking, but I don't even care. It's been fantastic. I've learned so much today.
Well, you've done a good job, man. Keep doing this because you ask good questions, but your enthusiasm comes through very strong. This was good. It was an easy interview because you led it the right way. So congratulations, man. I hope this thing gets a big following and helps you. Not this interview. I mean, your podcast.
Of course.
Yeah. So appreciate you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Just hang tight. Let me stop the recording.